So if you've been following these tutorials so far, then you'll remember that in the last one, we covered how to go about beginning our journey towards constructing a Darwin trading terminal. And we focused specifically on charting functionality. So as the major building block of the terminal that will be involved in practically everything from live trading to demo trading, backtesting, we're always going to visualize an asset or portfolio of Darwin assets in this terminal that we're trying to build. So we started from the bare bones, built ourselves a chart that could be used as a plug and play building block in future iterations in this series. Now, as part of this terminal, we're also going to require having to pull information from our account, some important metrics such as current equity, any existing investments, any existing conditional orders, stop losses and take profits, etc., for maintaining some sort of table as you would see in any traditional trading platform where you can see your existing orders and any new orders you put in and historically what your account information looks like. In order for us to do that, we're going to have to rely on one additional API that is published on the API store, which is the Investor Account Info API. And today we're going to cover all the endpoints that this API provides in terms of accessing your account information, all the way from the very basics such as the account ID, which is an integral part of every operation that you'll ever perform with the Investor Account Info API, and then using that account ID to go ahead and process those actions. The available actions include, of course, getting your investor account ID from your account. So you'll authenticate as usual with your OAuth 2 flow, as we've done in previous tutorials up until this point in time. And then you'll access /investor accounts in order to get your investor account ID. And once you have this investor account ID, you will then use it to perform any actions that you wish to perform from the available list. Getting the account ID differs by the type of access that you've granted yourself or you've requested to be granted. So demo and real are the two environments that you have available to you via the API. Demo hooks you up to your demo account. Let's quickly go over to my investor account and see what that looks like. So in the top left corner, once you're in the platform, you'll see that you have any live portfolios that you've created for yourself. When you create a live portfolio, your default is live, which is provided to you once you create an account at DarwinX, but you also now have the flexibility of creating additional portfolios to segregate your investments in any criteria, with any criteria that you wish to follow. But you have one demo account, and it's in this demo account that we'll be testing all our functionality to make sure everything is working prior to considering going live with anything that we have that has potential. In this demo account, all the features are exactly the same as you would see in your live account in terms of accessing it, trading in it, all the information that's available to you in terms of equity at risk, invested available, equity, open P&L, etc., etc. There's literally no difference other than the environment, which is demo, where all actions are simulated, versus live, where all actions have consequences, good or bad. So we'll practice in our demo environment today. To access the demo environment, once you've created your tokens, generated your tokens via the platform, over here, let's go to Darwin's and click on the Darwin API beta area. Here's where you generate your tokens. And once you generate your tokens, you'll be provided two real and demo access tokens, demo access credentials and live credentials. And it's the demo access credentials that we're going to be using today to access components, endpoints in the Investor Account Info API and executing all available endpoints through Python. Now, your demo and real access credentials look exactly the same in terms of what they are, client ID and client secret, in addition to your DarwinX username and password, but they differ in their values. So live will have different values to demo. You'll need to create an additional configuration file if you're following the code along using this project. So inside your config area, as you'll have seen inside, not in API config, here we've created an additional file called creds_demo.cfg, and it follows the same format as the sample. You have your username, password, client ID, and client secret. In the username and passwords case, they are exactly the same as your DarwinX username and password. For the client ID and client secret, in the creds_demo.cfg, or whatever else you want to call it, you will need to supply your demo client ID and client secret, and that's it. And then you can initialize the API and start working in demo environments. In order for us to make this slightly simpler so that users can switch in between demo and live environments as per their preferences or requirements, we've made some additions to the DWX API base class to make this sort of a background process so you don't have to flip and flop between them every time you want to do something, and instead can simply set demo to true or demo to false to initialize your demo credentials or your live credentials in the respective environments. In this DWX API class, which has already been published to GitHub, you'll find the changes over here in terms of we've removed the static reference to creds.cfg and replaced it with the file name reference. Here's where you can change the file names if you have any reason to change them. They specify your demo and live credentials accordingly. Then these are based on your selection, based on the setting for demo, what you specified for the argument demo, false or true, the corresponding creds file will be loaded, and hence the corresponding environment will be made available to you, real or demo. Everything else in the function remains the same other than the inclusion of some additional request types, as you'll see shortly. We'll come back to this in a moment once we get to that particular request type. Now, inside the investor account info API, as you're pulling information, this is a read-only API, you have only GET requests, which makes things sort of convenient in a way that you don't have to mess about with different request types. It's straightforward GET, and you can use the call API functionality inside the base class to access all of these with the default GET parameter. Now let's go through each of these in terms of both what they do and the corresponding code, so you have an idea of how to implement this. The code, of course, has been implemented for you already. It exists now in a file called dwx_accinfo_api.py, and this file resides in the folder investor account info API, which has already been uploaded to GitHub for you and lives under the API directory. In here, you'll notice that as with any other API implementation that we've done, we've inherited everything from our DWX API class with the additional demo parameter to allow us to access both our demo and real environments depending on our use case. And then a few messages go off that, hey, you've been connected to demo or real, and then the functionality starts. These are the implementations for each of the endpoint. It is not at all necessary to have a different method for each endpoint. There are several methods, as you'll see. Let's go back to the API store. There are several methods for which you could technically block operations inside one function, specify a list of parameters to validate the sort of inputs that that function can receive, and then essentially switch through depending on the inputs applied by you or any other user of your solution and execute the corresponding endpoint. In this case, we have /investor accounts, as I mentioned before, that sends back your account ID. We'll go through all of these in a moment. If you provide that investor account ID back to the endpoint /investor accounts / the account ID you got, then you get some details about your account in response. These include available to invest, available is your available funding, available to invest, the leverage on your account, the equity, current equity of your portfolio, your account, the account, not portfolio, how much you have invested, what is the currency of your account, the maximum risk that you've set, etc., your open P&L, etc. And this information can be used in a variety of ways, such as on our eventually terminal-looking Darwin Trading Terminal will have an area that lists in real time what the account specifics are, such as real-time equity, real-time P&L, etc., similar to what you see on the platform when you go to the investor platform area, like so up here. These things update in real time as your portfolio ebbs and flows through the market. Then you have conditional order endpoints. Now here you can list any pending, executed, deleted, rejected, or cancelled conditional orders in your account. Pending means that you've specified a conditional order and that it hasn't yet been touched. Executed is the opposite. You specified a conditional order at some point and it has already been executed. Deleted is when you specified one, it never ended up getting touched, or and the trade was closed and the system deleted it, or you deleted it and didn't need it anymore. You had some other use case to define that deletion. Rejected is when you specified a conditional order, but the system did not fulfill the order due to some reason that will be provided to you by the API in response when that happens. And finally, you have canceled, which is also another situation where your order did not go through, and you'll be provided the appropriate reasoning by the API in the JSON response. You can also find conditional orders. We have search functionality in the Investor Account Info API. So you can find a conditional order by its ID by simply supplying the conditional order ID of the order to / conditional orders after, of course, after specifying / investor accounts and your investor account ID. For this, you'll of course need to know the conditional order ID, and that's not immediately visible. So you'll be well advised to first list the executed conditional orders or pending or deleted or whatever type of order that you're trying to find, if you're aware of that, and then be able to do something with that order. List current open positions will allow you to list all open positions that you have on your list of Darwins, the portfolio that you have. And then list of replica orders already executed. These will list the orders that have already gone through for you. Find order by ID, list of closed trades, anything you've closed. This will touch your history and get you that visual. List of open trades, find trade by ID, all of them resembling the same functionality at their core, such as listing conditional orders, executing them, deleting them, etc. So let's go straight to the implementation for all of these and go through the structure of the code so you understand how you can possibly integrate it, or if you wish to use it as is, how you can do that too. The code starts off by inheriting things from DWX API, our base class. We import the base class as usual from the API root directory, define our class name as DWX_ACC_info_API, provide the API name, which in our case is Investor Account Info. This is visible on the actual Darwin API overview page for the Investor Account Info API. It's right over there. Let's go back to the code. Version 1.1 also supplied over there, and set demo to true or false depending on which environment you'd like to connect to. The default is true, so if you don't change this value, you'll automatically be logged into your demo environment if you've configured the demo CFG as we mentioned earlier. Going into each of the endpoints implementations, here you have get accounts, which makes a call to / investor accounts, as we saw earlier. All the calls are get calls, get request types. You'll be returned your response with the investor account ID of the demo account in this case, since we've set demo to true, and real account if you've set it to false. Get account info. This will provide you with the information we saw earlier about your account. You'll need to supply the ID, the account ID that you retrieved through / investor accounts, supply it to this function, and that will output the corresponding specifics of your account back to you in JSON format, as is the case with all API responses. Get trade by ID over here. If you have access to the ID, then you can supply it along with your investor account ID to the API, which is essentially a call to a call API, and get that JSON response. Same with get order ID, get conditional order ID, get conditional order by status. Here is where we saw the pending, deleted, executed, rejected, and canceled endpoints on the API store page. Here we validate the input by the user, especially the status input. And if that input doesn't exist in this list of controlled inputs, pending, executed, rejected, canceled, deleted, then we get an appropriate error message saying, sorry, invalid conditional order status supplied. Please correct it to the one that is considered valid. And then it executes a call to the Investor Account Info API / conditional orders with the status, supplying the product name, the page, and per page. We didn't discuss this earlier, so let's go back to conditional orders by status really quickly and go through that particular set of query parameters so you have an idea of what we're doing here. Let's go through a list of pending conditional orders. The inputs to this particular endpoint require, of course, every input requires your investor account ID, with the exception of investor accounts where you actually get your investor account ID if you're authenticated via OAuth 2. Now, there are two ways to access conditional orders. You can access all conditional orders on the account, which will, if you've got a large portfolio with lots of conditional orders flying around, then that will return a very large response. And in that case, you may be served well by a pagination feature that allows you to sift through the particular page or specify a per page number so you don't have to get access to all of them all at once. So we have some pagination implemented into the API here, whereby you can specify the page and per page values to your convenience. So here, if you set per page, every page that you go through, page 0, page 1, 2, etc., 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 will return to you that many number of elements, an element being a conditional order JSON block, for the number of records that you have, for the number of conditional orders actually that actually exist in your account. So if you've set this to 50, but there are only 2 conditional orders in your account for any particular reason, then regardless of the page you set, you'll always get that same list back because that is what you supplied. So that's the case with essentially all of the conditional order: executed, deleted, rejected, etc., etc., etc. With current positions, you can also siphon through current positions. If you do not provide a product name, then you'll get all current open positions. However, if you'd like to filter through and you're particularly interested in one Darwin, then you can supply that Darwin's product name, which is the full ticker symbol in, let's say, PLF's case is PLF.4.1. If you supply that to your query, then you will get all open positions only on only PLF, etc. And that's essentially the case. So if you think about it from building the terminal's perspective, we're going to need that sort of functionality because we may have at some point a table somewhere on our terminal that lists all our positions, but we may want to have some sort of sorting functionality or search functionality or selection functionality, whereby we'd only like to select a particular Darwin for analysis in terms of, hey, what are my positions on this Darwin? Have I sent any conditional orders for this? What is their status, etc., etc., etc. So it would be useful to have an endpoint that allows us to do this, and more importantly, allows us to specify any product name, a Darwin, that we're interested in, so we can analyze things in closer detail as far as the trading platform is concerned, the terminal is concerned. Right, so going back to the code to go through the rest of these calls, again, get conditional order by status has been grouped into one function. So all the calls that are available in version 1.1 of the investor account info API are grouped together in this one function that simply accepts the status, the Darwin, which should be PLF.4.1 in this case, the full ticker symbol, the page number you're interested in, and the per page values, and so on and so forth. Same goes for current open positions. If you'd like to get all of them, leave the Darwin, which is product name, empty. If you'd like current open positions for a particular Darwin, then specify the Darwin of interest with the full ticker symbol, and you'll get that particular JSON output in response, if of course there are any current open positions on that Darwin. Same is the case with executed orders, exactly the same specification. Change the endpoint, specify the product name if you wish, and the page and per page values that you're interested in. And same is the case with get trades by status. So it's fairly uniform in the way the API has been developed. Things flow, and if you're used to developing using one particular paradigm for any one of the APIs, such as the info API or the trading API, etc., then you'll find that those paradigms follow through nicely into all subsequent APIs, and the general way in which you approach programming them becomes a lot more convenient, which is useful because you can rapidly develop code for any new features that are added to APIs or any new APIs themselves that may be added in future. And that's essentially it. So this class is operationally ready. So let's go ahead and close our Darwin Trading Terminal instance and load this particular class so we can do some examples. So firstly, let's create ourselves an object using the DWX ACC info class. Make sure the default is set to true already, but we'll set it to true here for completeness. And this, you'll see, will tell us that, okay, access and refresh tokens were retrieved successfully, and the investor account info API version 1.1 has been initialized in the demo environment. Then let's go ahead and get my account ID. Since I'm logged into demo, I have no concerns as to people getting my demo investor account ID. So we can visualize that over here without a problem. So for everybody's knowledge, my demo investor account ID is 200004540, and we're going to use that in subsequent calls to the API. So now that we have this value, let's save it somewhere conveniently. Let's call this account ID, or let's call it AID for short, equals that value over there. This is what we'll be using in subsequent calls to other functions that we've defined for each of the endpoints in the investor account info API. Let's go get it, and let's go ahead and get some of our information together. So about the account, let's get some information about the account. In this case, we will get account info, which requires a single parameter underscore ID, and that we saved in the underscore AID parameter earlier, variable earlier. As you can see, it tells us that I have 10,042.38 available. Available to invest is also the same, which means I have no current open positions. The equity is also the same, hence there's no open P&L, there's nothing invested. The currency of my account, the maximum risk of set, and the nature of my account, this being demo in this case, the name of my account. Now, to visualize the operations, the other operations that we've developed methods for, let's go ahead and execute some demo trades to get an idea of how all of this would work. So let's randomly, well, it's impossible to randomly select a Darwin off the top of my head because there are a few always floating at the top of my head. So we'll go with our good friend Klonvik AFX and execute a demo trade on the demo environment on NTI using the minimum $200 investment. And we'll also add some conditional orders here. So the current quote for NTI is 228.78. So we'll add a stop loss that please hit this, get me out at 225. And we'll say I'd like a take profit at 240. So the take profit, once 240 is triggered, this conditional order will execute. And if 225 is triggered, then that conditional order will execute. Also note that the quoted price and the current quote are exactly the same, plus 0.000%, which is very likely that NTI is not live in the market right now. And we click on buy. So we have our demo trade now in execution. We have the conditional orders there set for take profit and stop loss as well. Now, if we're in the API, we can pull this information. So obviously we've set some conditional orders in there. We've set some positions in there. So let's get our positions. Let's go straight to positions, list open positions, and that function name is get current open positions. Since I know I only have one Darwin on which I have an order and conditional orders to go with it, I will very simply go to acc._get current open positions. Over here, you need to supply the account ID. In every query, you need to supply the account ID, and that ID is the one we saved earlier on inside the variable underscore AID. And you also need to supply the Darwin name if you have more than one Darwin open. For completeness, we'll specify it here anyway. And for this, of course, we'll need the full ticker symbol. So NTI's full ticker symbol. If you hover over the NTI hyperlink there, you'll see that on the bottom left of your screen, if you're using Google Chrome, for instance, you'll see the URL for this Darwin, and it'll show that the ticker symbol right at the end there is NTI 0.4.12. Now that we know that, we very simply go over to back to our code and go NTI.4.12 and hit enter. This will give us information about our open position here. So our open position is invested at 200. The investment at risk is hence 20, and the average quote and the current quote are the same. Divergence is 0. Leverage on the account is 1. The open P&L is 0 because NTI is not in the market at this point in time. Now remember, we also specified a stop loss and a take profit. And since those haven't been executed yet, it's very likely that they will be pending. So in order for us to see any pending conditional orders on our account, we'll go ahead and say underscore acc.get conditional orders by status. And since I know that the conditional order's status is pending, I needn't look for any other status. Since NTI is not live, the conditional orders have therefore not been hit, neither is the market order moved anywhere because NTI is not live at this point in time. Now we hit enter, and this will essentially, account provided does not belong to used ID. That's because the account default variable is 0, and I forgot to enter my account ID over here. And there are no conditional orders because, and you'll notice that the video skipped forwards a little bit, that's because the Darwin variable inside the code does have a value, and that's set to PLF 4.1 as an example. In our call that we performed earlier on, we did not specify an empty string for Darwin, and that essentially made the call to the function look for PLF, which didn't exist in the portfolio. It's in fact NTI. But we want to practice here without specifying any Darwin, so we pull all the information. Also note that the default page and per page values in the function over here are 0 and 1. So what we'll do here is keep it page 0, but set a per page value to much higher than that so that we get all our outputs in one JSON block. And that's it. So we've emptied out the Darwin string. It will look for any Darwin that currently has an order, a pending conditional order, and list that for us. So here are the two conditional orders that we executed alongside our, well, didn't execute, but submitted earlier on for NTI alongside our order for NTI. So they were a sell and a sell greater than or equal, sell less than equal. In both cases, you sell the Darwin, but the case is different. So in the less than equal case, the trigger price is 225, and that less than equal case is our stop loss. So if the price were to go below 225, then or touch 225, then this order would get triggered. The second order is sell greater than equal, and that is our take profit. If the threshold quote of 240 is touched or exceeded, then this order will get triggered and get us out of our position by that amount. So you can also have engineer the flexibility to take yourself in and out of a particular position by an amount. You don't necessarily have to kill the entire position. Of course, that's there for you to do should you wish to, by essentially setting the exact amount that you put on the order for both the conditional orders. But if you have some sort of in and out strategy whereby you are reducing or increasing the amount of your investment in a particular Darwin over time due to some algorithmic or otherwise criteria, then you have the flexibility via the API in order for you to do so, and also obviously via the investor platform. So that was an example of how to find an order by its status, getting current open positions. So if we go to _acc._get open positions again, just to recap on that particular front, you'll notice that the response is again without our ID. So we'll set that to AID and make sure that we haven't specified anything for the Darwin, even though the default value is an empty string. So the get open positions are what we submitted earlier. It's the only position on the account. It's also a convenient way for you to get information back about conditional orders that are attached to that order. So we submitted an order for 200 at 228.78, and alongside it, we also specified some conditional orders for stop loss and take profit that get the order out at 225 or 240, depending on which direction the asset has gone. Same is the case for trades by status, executed orders. Everything's been implemented here for you, and the use cases are made clear on the API store listing for API documentation at the store listing for you as well. So this tutorial covered practically everything to do with the Account Info API, and the code that's been uploaded for you already on GitHub implements every functionality, every endpoint that you see on the API store. And should there be any further endpoints added in future, we will be adding the corresponding code to these scripts for your convenience as well. Thank you. As always, if you enjoyed this presentation, please do consider sharing it with your social networks, colleagues, co-workers, and friends. And do subscribe to the DarwinX YouTube channel so you remain up to date with all future videos that will be released in this series and other topics discussed on DarwinX. Thank you very much for your attention. See you next time.